used to speak of changing your mind. That's if you had a mind to speak of. It's all psychomorphology phenomena. It's all psychomorphology phenomena.
It's time for an update on the book, The Never-Ending Story of the Book. The book is called The Grace of Uncertainty, although I am gaining some traction on some other areas of maybe social analysis, sociology, maybe some ideas of religion and its role in culture. And the caption and the title is undergoing some kind of change. And it is now looking like, and maybe I'll put a picture of it here, it's all just AI-generated goop and slop and whatever you call it. But it gives me a concept to sort of shoot for and try to make sure that the words align with what I'm thinking of and make sure the cover aligns with what I've written. And so the book is now taking shape to mean, or to be titled, The Grace of Uncertainty is still there on the title. But instead of the journey from dogma to agnosticism, I've taken that line out. And instead of the grace as an absolute definite article, I call it Finding the Grace of Uncertainty, a story of the good goat. Now, there is a story in how the goat appears, and the goat appears as a bespectacled, intelligent goat with some, refinements and some books, armloads of books, armloads of history, armloads of philosophy, armloads of logic and reason. And he is sitting on the shoulders of a fellow whose back is turned, who's wearing the shirt that got this whole book project started. Jesus is my savior. Trump is my president, to which I graffitied at the bottom, WTF. And there's the title. As it sits right now, inspirational to me because I've moved from the actual T-shirt of the Trump MAGA rallies back in 2016, 2020, and I'm sure they appeared in 2024 as well. Anyway, that's just to say that's where the book is headed. But what gets me now is the excitement I'm feeling as I'm working with the AI to sort of get some traction on the research end of things, to bring some dots together, tie them together in a better shaped bow than I could do with my own clumsy fingers and thumbs. And so the part that I want to start with, I'll get back to the cover in a moment, but for now, let me just talk about the preface and the overarching idea that I'm using to frame the entire reflection on both the biography, which is chapter 1, where certainty is learned. And it is learned and modeled at home, at school, and at church. And so you grow up a nice little widget in the community, believing without question, usually, assuming without doubt that things have always been, will always be the same, and that the Bible has always been, is presently, and will always be the same, infallible, inerrant in the autographs, and worth believing and changing up your life and your way of looking at life, your way of looking at people, in terms of what the Bible teaches and what pastors preach from the pulpits. But now I'm posing a frame and seeing how well the data fits. So my assumption has always been there's something broken in the church. It broke in the post-World War II era. It broke when the evangelical community, starting with the likes of maybe figures such as Billy Graham, and going on into the 1980s prosperity gospelers and the TV, radio phenomenons of Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, Jimmy Swaggart, Oral Roberts, Pat Robertson, the Power Hour, and all of these networks of TV and radio that seem to take everybody by storm and say, by gosh, America's great. America is white and it's Protestant and it's evangelical. Isn't that great? And let's keep it that way, which means it's on a rear guard action because society does change. Immigration does change the complexion. Multiculturalism changes the way we look at people. At least it should. And Jesus certainly welcomed the poor and admonished us to make sure that we do, and we can measure our faith by our works, apparently, and by the fruit, which is the character. You can know them. Don't claim to know something that the church is teaching or preaching unless you've checked that out for yourself. And Jesus was certainly one to question status quo. I'll leave it at that. Whether he was a rebel without a cause, a James Dean kind of leather jacket, motorcycle. Is that what he would have been in the 50s or 60s? Would have been a long-haired, bearded hippie in the 60s and 70s? Would have been flower power? Well, the Jesus movement came through the hippie movement, and flowers were at Kent State during the Four Dead in Ohio. Do you remember that song? Yeah, when the troops are used to quell dissent. There's a great book by, her first name I can't get at the moment, but her last name, I think it's Julia Kraut, and it's Dissent. It's all about the threat of dissent, saying that what's going on with ICE, with Homeland Security, border customs, all of that heavy-handedness is not new to America. They've been doing it from the get-go. So do we really expect the iteration of America as Trump has shaped it to be any different? Well, that's where I sort of take a look at a book, Jesus and John Wayne. And the author escapes me at the moment too, but let's just say it's at titles out there, Jesus and John Wayne, taking a look at how America has decided to go away, to be led astray from Jesus, the humble, suffering servant, to John Wayne, gotta get him, George Bush isms, America strong, Pete Hegseth, powerful military, powerful. And Trump's own Truth Social posts, we're going to bomb them into oblivion. These kinds of things, how did that happen? And so looking at evangelicalism, there's a great book that a friend of mine recommended to me. The Shadow Gospel talks about how this dark gospel of power and politics usurped the humility and servanthood of the association of believers. It's now, what power can we broker? How can we overturn things that we do not like because they have been turned over in the past? Roe versus Wade is just the most obvious one. Established laws, said the court justices as they applied to be nominated. Kavanaugh said the same thing. I think Roberts said the same thing, but it was overturned. So how does this happen? Well, I'm going to trace that in the book because my personal journey out of evangelicalism and out of belief comes on the tailcoats of all these societal changes. And unbeknownst to me at the time, as I went merrily off to non-denominational theological college to study history at Waterloo, to go into education, spend a career teaching history and document analysis, it's kind of surprising to me that modern scholarship, especially on the evangelical side, is so determined to do a rearguard action. And that's what the song at the beginning of this track, I used it from a Wigmore Allen Gibbons tune. You can see it on terrywigmore.com. It's in the album called Wigmore Allen Gibbons, Wait and See, and it is track number 9, called Psychomorphology, which is just a tongue-in-cheek way of saying we think we know what we're talking about. We think we're right, and we're certain we're right, but it's all just psychomorphology, things that change in the mind. And so that takes me to the preface of the book, having started to get my teeth into things, and I'm looking at evangelicalism, especially as it's expressed today in 2026, especially in the Christian nationalist movement. And that's where I'm going to start with this one. I'm just going to drop it in as a hint of where I have gone in the past year or so. I haven't posted a podcast on the book for a while. So here it is. The model that I'm using to understand all the changes that I have been part of and witnessed, so it's both as a participant and an observer, from the time of going into training in theology to my exit from Orthodox evangelicalism in the early 2000s. It's been a journey now of about 20 some odd years, 25 years into agnosticism. And the question for me is, how do I understand this? And the useful tool that I found to frame it is a book by Dr. Steven Hassan, and it's called the BITE model for understanding when something, when a claim, when a movement, when a gathering of people who seem to be united, when is that now not a movement, but a cult? And somewhat facetiously, somewhat I say, because there are some ways in which it does resemble a cult. People have applied that cult term to the MAGA political movement, Make America Great Again, Donald Trump and his cap. The cap is a sign. You dress a certain way when you're part of a cult. You all get your hair cut the same way, wear the same robes, the same Nike shoes, the whatever it is, you have identifiers, but there's more to it. So in the preface to the book is now an exploration of Dr. Hassan's BITE, the behavior, the information control, the thought control, and emotion control. So to sum it all up, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, it probably is a duck. So this is the model developed to understand how people become part of an authoritarian control group, which we would assume the name cult. And so that becomes a formative exploration and tracks my own view of these things, how I defended things that I didn't necessarily agree with in my youth, my 20s, even into my 30s. When I started having kids, it became, well, I believed it was necessary to defend the authority of the church in its claims because I was part of it. So I couldn't, of course, attack the very thing that I was part of, could I? That's the cognitive dissonance that will become part of the examination of the book as well. And eventually, there are enough points of data that apologists in the Christian realm throw under the carpet, things that they deny, pseudoscience that they embrace as opposed to science. The difference between the two is explored. And basically, I wanted to know the difference between when I started my faith journey in the 70s to when I left it in the early 2000s. What had changed in apologetics? And so a big chapter of the book is now examining archaeology, anthropology, psychology, sociology, in terms of changes in both the Middle East and what we know about culture and human evolution in tribal development and groups and ancient civilizations in the Mesopotamian area, the Middle East. How did Yahweh emerge out of that? And then I look at whether the stories in Genesis are necessarily true, whether they're written by Moses. How do we know? How do we tell? And it becomes an exploration of what do we know now in the 50 years since I started my own journey. And the answer came to a very abrupt head, a pinprick of an idea when I was given by a well-intended friend a book by Josh Mcdowell. It was the second edition of Evidence That Demands a Verdict. Now, I collected the first book in the 70s as part of my rigorous theology training to be able to defend the faith using the data points that apologists were giving me. The unfortunate thing is that as you know more, it becomes apparent that there are things that are being omitted, things that are being massaged, a narrative that is being curated, as opposed to evidence that demands a verdict. It's a story that requires evidence. And that is the problem. So that's where I'm going. The book is making some headway at this point, and if I'm lucky, it might be before this Christmas. I don't know how many years I've been saying that, but I'm getting some satisfaction out of doing some more current applications of my ideas, things that don't make sense in the present. And the T-shirt was just the one example from years ago, but there are things going on still that seem to suggest that the cult-like BITE behavior, information, all of that is going on as well. So it's still today, and that's my point. It's ongoing, and the sooner we understand it, the sooner we can deal with it. In terms of politics, we can unelect. We can vote for people who don't propose these things, and that's really where I'm at with the book. I'm not preaching to the choir. I'm not preaching to those who have, quote, deconstructed. It's appealing to those who have decided to ask rational questions and for whom the evidence of faith is really a shell game, where the truth is being hidden under multiple cups that are being swapped along from generation to generation by perhaps graciously, I'll say, well-intended scholars, but on the other side of the coin is the nefarious intent of power structures, male, white, perhaps in control of the institutions, the levers of power, to keep things stuck. And one of the things that they use to keep you stuck is fear. And fear is an awful thing. Fear of hell, fear of eternal conscious torment, ECT. Not sure that that's in the Bible, but if you want to threaten people with, well, you're going to hell unless... No, we'll sort of let God make the decisions. And that's where I ascribe to Grace Unlimited. The 360-degree model of omni-God is omni in all directions of character, which means grace overcomes judgment. And that means fear has no place. Fear of other. That gets back to Julia Kraut's thesis in her book about dissent, the threat of dissent, the very fear of others. We saw it in Minnesota with the ICE raids that resulted in the murder of 2 citizens. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Fear does all kinds of irrational things. Don't let it grab you. Let's find a way out of this thing. Let's use Steven Hassan's BITE model and see how we can interpret what we are being taught through the lens of modern scholarship. All right, that's it for now. We'll look forward to a next installment as I make my way further down this pathway. Remember, this is the story of a good goat. And I said I'd wrap up by explaining the goat. Well, you all know the story of the separation of the sheep and the goat. And so I have decided that if the goats are to go to the left, and the left is Latin for sinister, therefore evil, I want to be the best evil goat that I can be. The good goat. A tale of somebody on the fringe who's been othered by the status quo of evangelical theology, not by evidence. There you go. So grab your books. Come along for the ride.
Yeah, you used to speak of changing your mind. That's if you had a mind to speak of. It's all psychomorphology phenomena. It's all psychomorphology phenomena. You used to say it's all in your mind. I used to tell you that wasn't being too kind. It's an academy of parascience. It's somewhere safe for me to